Millionaire bought a cabin to escape. The pain, but found a young black woman with twins. The clinking of silverware fell silent when Victor Langston's voice sliced through the luxury restaurant's golden hum. "Who served this dish?" he demanded, his sharp eyes sweeping across the polished marble floor until they landed on Naomi Carter. She stood frozen beside the table, her hands trembling slightly, the faint scent of rosemary still clinging to her apron. Naomi's voice barely escaped her throat as she tried to explain, "Sir, I followed the exact order." But Victor cut her off with a laugh that carried the weight of power. "You followed it? Do you call this professionalism? This is $1 million client you embarrassed tonight." His words were venom wrapped in charm, perfectly calculated to humiliate without raising his tone. The guests exchanged uneasy glances and the staff looked away. No one dared to defend her. Naomi's chest tightened as her eyes darted between Victor's smirk and the uneaten plate. She knew she was being framed, but this was not the place to fight back. Her dignity was the only thing she had left, yet even that was slipping away in the glittering cruelty of the moment. The shame burned deeper than the injustice itself. One more accusation and she would lose the only job keeping her twins fed. Before we find out how far they went to break her, take a second to support stories like Naomi's. Hit the like button and subscribe so more people hear voices like hers. Victor stepped closer, his voice lowering into something darker. "You are finished here, Naomi," he whispered, loud enough for the entire room to hear. The sound of her name echoed through the hall like a verdict, moments before he called security. The Langston Grand was not just a restaurant. It was a kingdom built on reputation, luxury, and fear. Every night, its crystal chandeliers bathed the hall in a golden glow, while violins played softly behind the chatter of the elite. For most, it was a sanctuary of power and indulgence. But for Naomi Carter, it was survival. She worked 16-hour shifts without complaint, her smile steady, even when her feet ached and her back burned. Every dollar she earned went toward rent for a one-bedroom apartment and food for her 6-year-old twins, Ava and Noah. She was known among the staff for her kindness, her quiet resilience, and the way she treated everyone, from the janitor to the guests, with genuine respect. But in a place like Langston Grand, kindness was mistaken for weakness. Victor Langston, the owner and CEO, was the kind of man who could charm a crowd and crush a person in the same breath. In front of investors, he was all poise and elegance. Behind closed doors, his words could slice skin. He built his empire on fear, and people obeyed not out of respect, but survival. That night's chaos started with a single glass of wine. A bottle worth more than Naomi's weekly paycheck was mistakenly poured for the wrong guest, a powerful senator's wife. When the woman frowned and whispered to Victor, his expression darkened instantly. He turned the mistake into a public spectacle, pretending to be calm while his eyes burned with accusation. "Naomi," he said smoothly, "you were assigned to table 9, were you not?" "Yes, sir," Naomi answered carefully, her voice steady despite the tightening in her chest. "But I did not pour that glass. Ethan handled the table while I was—" Ethan Wells, her supervisor, cut in before she could finish. "Sir, I told her to double-check the bottle label. She must not have done it properly." His tone was flat, calculated. Naomi stared at him stunned. Ethan knew the truth. He had been the one to grab the bottle in a rush. But his loyalty to Victor was stronger than his loyalty to truth. Victor tilted his head, pretending to consider both sides. "So you are saying your supervisor is lying?" Naomi's throat tightened. "No, sir, I am saying—" "Enough!" His voice sharpened, the mask of civility dropping for a split second. "You have already embarrassed me once tonight." The other servers stopped moving. Tara Brooks, a soft-spoken waitress barely older than Naomi, watched from the corner, her eyes filled with worry. She had seen the switch of bottles earlier, but saying anything now could cost her job too. Naomi caught Tara's gaze for a moment, a silent exchange of pain and helplessness. Lucas Reed, a customer seated near the bar, noticed everything. He looked out of place among the suits and gowns, quiet, observant, with a calm intelligence that cut through the noise. While everyone else stared in judgment, Lucas watched Victor. His eyes narrowed slightly, like someone recognizing an old pattern of cruelty. The room's energy shifted as Victor raised his voice again, this time for everyone to hear. "Mistakes are costly here, Miss Carter. You have been given more chances than you deserve. Naomi's face flushed, but she refused to cry. Sir, with all respect, I did not make this mistake. Her calmness irritated him more than an argument would have. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a cold whisper meant only for her. If you value your job, you will take responsibility for it quietly. Do you understand? For a moment, Naomi said nothing. Her silence was not submission. It was defiance wrapped in composure. The kind of strength that men like Victor mistook for fear. Ethan folded his arms, standing behind Victor like a shadow. I will file a report, sir, he said dryly. Victor gave a small nod. Make sure it is her last warning. As the night dragged on, Naomi kept working with mechanical precision, her mind replaying the scene again and again. The humiliation, the injustice, the lies, all of it burned inside her. Yet she stayed. She stayed because walking out meant failing her children. When the guests finally left and the chandeliers dimmed, Tara approached quietly. Naomi, she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one could hear. I know it wasn't your fault. Ethan switched the bottles. I saw him. Naomi managed a faint smile. Thank you, Tara, but the truth won't save anyone here. Tara's voice trembled. You cannot let them do this to you again. Naomi looked around the empty dining hall, the golden walls, the marble floors, the reflection of her tired face in the glass. They already have, she said softly. But one day, they won't. From across the room, Lucas Reed watched her gather her things in silence. There was something about the way she carried herself, even in defeat, that held his attention. He had seen this kind of injustice before, in places where power hid behind politeness. And something in his expression said he was not done watching yet. Outside, the night air was heavy with rain. Naomi walked down the quiet street, her reflection shimmering in puddles beneath the streetlights. She had no idea that tonight's humiliation would be the spark that changed everything. The moment that would tie her fate to a man she had never met before, and to a truth far darker than she could imagine. By the next morning, whispers were already moving through the hallways of Langston Grand. Naomi Carter's name was on every tongue, each retelling, twisting the truth a little more. Some said she had insulted the senator's wife. Others claimed she had poured the wine on purpose to get attention. Every story painted her as careless, desperate, or worse. Naomi walked past them quietly, eyes low, heart heavy, but her steps never faltered. When she entered the staff room, the air went still. Ethan Wells stood near the schedule board, pretending not to see her. His crisp white shirt was spotless, his expression unreadable. You are lucky Victor did not fire you last night, he said coldly, without looking up. He wanted to, but I convinced him to give you one more chance. Naomi met his gaze for the first time. You convinced him? She repeated softly. Or did you convince him that I was to blame? Ethan smirked, straightening his tie. Careful, Naomi. Attitude will not get you anywhere here. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. She returned to her duties, folding napkins and polishing glasses like nothing had happened. Yet she could feel the eyes on her, every glance sharp, every whisper cutting deeper. Later that afternoon, during the lunch rush, Victor Langston appeared in the dining area. His smile was charming as always, his designer suit flawless. He shook hands with investors, laughed with guests, and carried himself like a man made of confidence. But when his eyes landed on Naomi, his smile thinned. He walked over to her table, pretending to adjust a wine bottle. You again, he said lightly, his tone dripping with mock sympathy. I trust you double-checked everything this time? We wouldn't want another mistake, would we? A few nearby guests chuckled quietly. Naomi felt her face flush, but she kept her composure. Yes, sir, she said simply. Victor leaned in, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I know people like you, Naomi. You work hard, hoping someone notices, but they never do. You are not meant for places like this. Accept that, and life will hurt less. Her heart thudded in her chest, but she did not look away. Maybe, she said quietly, but it does not mean I will stop trying. Victor's smile vanished for a second, replaced by irritation. We'll see how long that attitude lasts. As he walked away, Naomi caught sight of Lucas Reed sitting by the corner window, reading a document. He had watched the exchange from a distance, his expression calm but thoughtful. When Naomi moved past his table to serve another guest, he looked up and said gently, Do not let them define you. She blinked in surprise. Excuse me? He smiled faintly. Men like that, people like that, they feed on silence. Keep yours too long, and they will mistake it for weakness. Naomi hesitated, unsure how to respond, then gave a polite nod before moving on. But his words lingered in her mind long after. By evening, things got worse. Ethan called Naomi into the manager's office, where Victor sat behind his glass desk, scrolling through his phone. Miss Carter, he said without looking up. We've had another complaint. A guest reported that you were inattentive during service. Naomi frowned. Sir, I attended every table assigned to me today. Victor sighed dramatically. You see, Ethan, this is what I mean. No sense of accountability. Ethan nodded obediently. Yes, sir. It's becoming a pattern. Naomi's voice trembled, not from fear but exhaustion. I did nothing wrong. Victor finally looked at her, eyes cold as marble. Do you have proof? Her silence filled the room. He smiled faintly. That's what I thought. For a moment she considered walking out, just leaving it all behind. The insults, the lies, the false smiles. But then she saw her twins' faces in her mind, their laughter, their small hands reaching for her after long shifts. She could not afford pride. Not yet. Understood, sir, she said finally, forcing the words through the weight in her throat. Victor leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Good. You'll take unpaid suspension for the weekend. Perhaps that will teach you to be more careful. When Naomi stepped out of the office, Tara was waiting near the hallway, her face pale. They suspended you? Naomi nodded, her voice quiet. Just for a few days. That's not fair, Tara whispered. You are one of the best here. Naomi smiled faintly. Fairness does not live here, Tara, only survival. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the city in orange light. Naomi walked toward the bus stop, the weight of the suspension pressing on her shoulders. But deep inside, something else had begun to grow, a spark she did not recognize yet. Behind the glass windows of the restaurant, Lucas watched her leave. His hand rested on a folder beside his drink, documents with the Langston name printed across the top. The calm in his eyes hid something deeper, something deliberate. He had seen enough. As Naomi disappeared down the street, Lucas whispered under his breath, You have no idea what they've started. The rain began to fall again that night, washing the city streets clean, but not the memory of humiliation or the quiet anger building in Naomi's heart. What had started as one lie was now spreading through the walls of Langston Grand like fire, and no one could see yet how far the flames would reach. Naomi walked out of the restaurant into the cold evening air, her hands trembling as she clutched her coat tighter around her. Every step felt heavier than the last. The suspension letter burned in her pocket, a paper that carried humiliation, false accusations, and a verdict she had not earned. She considered walking away from it all, leaving behind the job, the endless sneers, even the place that had somehow given her hope of a better future. She stopped at the corner, staring at the glowing streetlights reflected in puddles from the afternoon rain. Her thoughts swirled. Maybe Victor Langston was right. Perhaps people like her were never meant to thrive in places like Langston Grand. Maybe silence and submission were all she could ever hope for. A sudden tap on her shoulder made her jump. She turned to see Lucas Reed standing there, calm and composed, with that quiet intensity in his eyes that always seemed to pierce through pretense. Miss Carter, he said softly, walking away will solve nothing. Naomi blinked, startled. And who are you really? She asked, voice edged with exhaustion. Lucas smiled faintly, as if her question amused him. Someone who knows the truth. Someone who sees how Victor and his company operate. I am not just a customer. My name is Lucas Reed, and I invest in businesses that matter. I also knew your father. Her heart skipped a beat. Her father, gone for years, had always been the one to teach her dignity, hard work, and courage. You knew him? She whispered. I did, Lucas replied, his tone grave. And he believed in people like you. That is why I am here. The next morning, Naomi returned to Langston Grand, her hands still shaking, but her spine straighter than ever. Victor Langston was at the front, rehearsing his charm for a line of important investors and guests. He did not notice her at first, but as she stepped onto the main floor, Lucas appeared behind her, holding a stack of documents and an air of authority that silenced the room. Victor, Lucas called out, his voice steady, resonating through the hall. "I believe it is time we review your practices in front of everyone here." Victor froze, his charm faltering for the first time. I do not know what you mean," he said, a trace of unease creeping into his voice. Lucas held up the documents. "These are complaints, schedules, financial discrepancies, and records of suspensions that do not match company policies. Employees like Naomi Carter are being treated unfairly, and your investors deserve to know." Gasps ran through the room. Guests whispered. Servers looked around nervously, and Ethan Wells' smug expression faltered. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. She had never expected help to arrive like this, not from someone like Lucas. He was speaking with authority, exposing the hypocrisy and cruelty that had been hiding behind Victor's polished smile. "Do you realize," Lucas continued, "that by suppressing dedicated employees, you are risking not only their lives but the reputation of this company? People are watching. People will remember how you treated Naomi Carter today." Victor opened his mouth to speak, but Lucas's gaze was unwavering, quiet yet commanding. The room held its breath. Naomi realized something shifting inside her, a strange, invigorating power she had not felt before. The fear and despair that had weighed her down were slowly replaced by something else. Courage. The presence of someone who recognized her worth, who understood her story, gave her the strength to stand taller, to lift her chin, and to meet Victor's eyes without flinching. She stepped forward quietly, letting Lucas's words echo. "I have worked here with integrity," she said softly but firmly. "I have done nothing wrong, and now the truth is out for everyone to see." Victor's face paled as murmurs rippled through the room. Ethan Wells tried to regain control, but even his voice sounded hollow now. Lucas glanced at Naomi, a small nod passing between them, a silent acknowledgement that this was the moment. The balance of power, long held firmly by Victor and his allies, was beginning to shift. The audience, investors, staff, and even patrons, started to root silently for Naomi, sensing the injustice that had gone on for far too long. The quiet awakening of justice filled the room, subtle yet unrelenting. Naomi felt her heart lift, not in triumph, but in anticipation. This was not the end. It was the beginning of a reckoning. From that moment, everything was different. Every whispered insult, every sneer, every unfair suspension now counted against them. Naomi Carter was no longer alone, and the people who believed themselves untouchable had just begun to see how fragile their empire really was. The stage was set, the tables were turning, and Naomi's story, once shadowed in humiliation, was becoming a tale of awakening, courage, and the first step toward justice. Naomi stood in the center of the restaurant floor, her hands steady, her voice clear. The room had gone silent. Lucas Reed, documents in hand, laid out the evidence of Victor Langston's schemes, manipulated payrolls, falsified employee evaluations, and letters showing deliberate discrimination against hard-working staff like Naomi. Every accusation had been backed by records, every claim verified, leaving no room for doubt. Victor's polished smile faltered, replaced by a twitch of unease. His charm, once his armor, now seemed brittle against the weight of truth. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words could erase the damning evidence laid bare before investors, patrons, and staff. Even Ethan Wells, who had enforced every unjust rule, looked on with unease, his authority diminished in the presence of clear justice. Naomi took a slow breath, feeling a strange clarity wash over her. "For months I was silenced," she said, her voice firm, carrying across the room. "I was made to feel that my integrity, my work, my very dignity, was worth less than fear and deceit. Today that ends. I will not be hidden. I will not be ignored. And neither will those who suffer in silence." Tara Brooks, the co-worker who had quietly supported Naomi behind the scenes, stepped forward. "Naomi is not alone," she said, her voice shaking but strong. Other employees, emboldened by the courage in Naomi's words and Lucas's revelations, nodded and whispered agreement. They had remained silent too long, but now they found a voice. Lucas glanced at Naomi, a small approving smile crossing his face. "This is how change begins," he said. Not with anger, but with truth. Victor shifted uneasily, trying to regain control, but the room no longer belonged to him. Every whisper and stare reminded him that power without integrity was fragile. The empire he had built on fear and deception was showing cracks, and those cracks were widening with every revelation. Naomi felt a mix of relief and quiet triumph. She had not needed vengeance, not in the traditional sense. Her strength had been in persistence, in holding on to her dignity while gathering the truth. The moral of her struggle became clear. Courage and honesty are far stronger than the temporary illusion of authority. As the documents circulated, Lucas assisted Naomi in ensuring justice would follow through proper channels, legal filings, formal complaints, and verified evidence. Naomi's restraint and composure made the impact even greater. She was not seeking to humiliate. She was demonstrating that integrity could withstand corruption and cruelty. The room, once heavy with tension, now hummed with a sense of accountability. Naomi's voice, once silenced, now resonated with empowerment. Victor Langston's influence began to crumble not through confrontation, but through the undeniable power of truth, integrity, and the collective courage of those who refused to remain silent. Justice was no longer a distant hope. It was unfolding here, in the center of a room that had once been the stage for humiliation, and Naomi Carter was at the heart of it. Victor Langston could no longer hide behind his polished smile. The evidence was everywhere: financial mismanagement, employee discrimination, and deliberate manipulation of the restaurant's public image. Facing mounting pressure from authorities, investors, and the public, he was forced to resign. Legal proceedings followed swiftly, and lawsuits were filed that would hold him accountable for every unethical decision he had made. His empire, once untouchable, was crumbling around him. Naomi Carter, meanwhile, began to feel a quiet sense of relief. The humiliation, the false accusations, and the constant pressure were behind her. Lucas Reed approached with an offer, a leadership position in his hospitality consulting firm, where her knowledge, integrity, and experience could shape a company built on fairness and respect. It was a chance not only to rebuild her career, but to help create an environment where no one would be silenced or overlooked again. Her co-workers, especially Tara Brooks, expressed admiration and gratitude, sharing that Naomi's courage had inspired them to speak up and stand for themselves. The restaurant began to transform under legal oversight, with new policies ensuring fairness and accountability. Naomi's story became a quiet symbol of change in the industry, proving that even small acts of honesty could topple systems built on fear and cruelty. As Naomi walked through the streets of the city she had once felt trapped in, there was a newfound confidence in her step. Every glance, every smile she received was not just recognition of her success, but a testament to her resilience. She had faced cruelty, deceit, and near defeat, and had come out stronger, wiser, and respected. The moral of her journey was clear. Integrity, patience, and courage endure far longer than arrogance and power. Lucas watched from a distance as Naomi held her head high, a faint smile on her lips. Together, they had turned a moment of injustice into a lesson for others, proving that standing for truth could ripple outward, touching lives and inspiring change. Naomi did not need vengeance. Her strength lay in rising above the cruelty that once sought to define her. Sometimes, the people they try to break are the ones built to rise highest. Naomi Carter had walked through fire and emerged stronger, a living reminder that courage and integrity could never be silenced.